Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. February is Black History Month, which originated with Carter G. Woodson, a scholar who established Negro History Week in February 1926 to celebrate the achievements of African Americans. It later evolved into Black History Month, with President Gerald Ford's official recognition in 1976. As you know, Another View celebrates Black history all year long, and we dedicate this month to Blacks and the arts. On today's show, jazz and democracy. Stay tuned for a thought-provoking conversation that's coming up next, right after this national, regional, and local news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. As always, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some things happening in our community before we get into our conversation for this hour. And I'm hoping that the Another View audience will really step up on this one because it's so important. So there's a call out for help for students at Norfolk State University and Old Dominion University. They are being hit hard by the price hikes that are going on for food and toiletries, and both university pantries need your support. Now, they're looking for non-perishable food items, toiletries, linen, and school supplies. And at NSU, it is NSU's Spartan Food Pantry. You can go to nsu.edu to find out more information, or you can call 757-823-2152 or 757-823-8407. And if you want to help the students over at ODU, that phone number to call is 757-683-4325. And the students would appreciate it. All students who are commuter as well as residential students can take advantage of the pantries. They don't pay for anything, but we've got to keep those pantries stocked. So let's help our young folks as they try to get their education. Also, want to tell you about something happening at the Chrysler Museum. Messages, the program is actually Joyce J. Scott Messages, opens up tonight at the Chrysler Museum of Art, and it features the intricate beadwork of renowned artist and activist Joyce Scott, who has elevated beadwork as a relevant contemporary art form over the past 3 decades. Now, Scott's subject matter, whether social or political, reflects the artist's own narrative of what it means to be Black in America. Admission is always free to the museum, and you can go to chrysler.org to learn more and register for programming connected with the exhibition on view through August 17th. So that opens up tonight. Go check it out. Joyce J. Scott Messages. Sounds like a lot of fun. So, despite the efforts of the Trump administration to erase diversity, equity, and inclusion, we here at Another View and people all over this country continue to uplift and celebrate the achievements and contributions of people of color. So happy Black History Month, listeners. Today, we welcome to our show Portsmouth native Wayne Winborne, Executive Director of the Institute of Jazz Studies at Rutgers University, Newark. It is the largest and most comprehensive archive and library of jazz and jazz-related materials in the world. Now, he's also Assistant Professor in the Arts, Culture, and Media Department and is a frequent presenter on jazz, art, and culture, democracy, civic engagement, racial reckoning, nonprofit management, and race and intergroup relations. I can't wait to talk to him. He has numerous publications and is editor of a 3-book series on race and intergroup relations, and he's the perfect person to guide a thoughtful discussion about where we are with the arts and culture during this turbulent time. Welcome, Wayne. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much.
And also joining us is our very own Jay Sennett, who is president and founder of Hampton Roads Jazz Incorporated and producer and host of Sennett in Session, heard right here on 89.5 WHRV. Hey, Jay.
Hey.
So what's happening tonight that brings Wayne back home to Portsmouth? I'm sure his family's happy, but or maybe not.
My organization, HR Jazz, we kick off our jazz lecture series tonight, and it's a 4-part series. Wayne would be the first lecturer speaking tonight, starting at 7 o'clock, and it's free and open to the public. We also highly encourage students to attend. It's part of the HR Jazz Educational Initiatives program. It's not just we just don't focus on performances and concerts and things like that, but we have educational showcases too. This is part of our educational initiative program, and Wayne will be the first speaker. And I found out about Wayne through Eugene Hawley, right? My good friend Eugene Hawley, because I wanted Eugene to come in and be a part of the lecture series as well. Great writer, and but he was dealing with some health issues, and he said, "Man, but I got somebody that you need to check out, right?" And he said, Wayne Winborne over at Rutgers. He said, "You really need to investigate this guy." He said, "I think he's from Virginia too." So I did. I investigated, and I kept investigating, and I kept investigating. I'm like, man, I'm exhausted just reading about this guy. I said, "Oh yeah, he would definitely be." And so I called Wayne, and he knew who I was, from being on the radio for so long down here, Hampton Roads, and he's from Portsmouth, and the perfect speaker for what we envisioned for our lecture series. And so I said, well, let's have Wayne kick it off. And then he gets to come home and see his family. And so that's how that's going on.
And that's going to be held at the Hampton History Museum, which is at 120 Old Hampton Lane over in Hampton. And it is free, everybody. So come on out and support them and support Wayne. And after you hear this conversation today, I'm telling you, you're going to want to come and see him. So Wayne, I'm coming to you to talk to you kind of from two different perspectives. We're going to talk about jazz and all that, but things are happening in our country right now that have a very definite bearing on the other work that you do in terms of DEI. Are we allowed to even say DEI anymore?
I don't know if you are.
Well, we're going to say it anyway here on this
by
show.
Any other name.
Absolutely, absolutely. But is your head spinning? Over the past 2 weeks?
It really is. These are very turbulent and crazy times. It's not that the world hasn't gone through this before. I always tell people that, W.B. Du Bois and others, when they started the NAACP and they had their publication, they didn't call it, things are really bad right now, but they're going to be worse in 1930. They called it Crisis Magazine. It was a crisis. And this was right around the time when George Washington Carver was deciding that we needed to celebrate all that African Americans had done post-slavery in the 50 years since slavery. That was a big part of the celebration. There was a big national gathering. I believe it was in Chicago, international gathering to celebrate. Black folks have been commemorating, various things, the 13th Amendment, Frederick Douglass's birthday, Abraham Lincoln's birthday, and so they were gathering in Chicago, and it was there that George Washington Carver, and I think it was 1915, said, "Hey."
Carter G. Woodson.
I said George Washington Carver. I love George Washington Carver. I love peanuts. Carter G. Woodson, thank you. Second African American to get a PhD from Harvard. Yeah, old age now. Carter G. Woodson said, we need to have a commemoration to celebrate all the stuff that's going on. So there have been crazy, turbulent times. We have not dealt with anything like this. We haven't dealt with a tsunami of just untruths and such a barrage of major change, some of which is designed to distract us, I think, while there are other things going on with the U.S. Treasury and cryptocurrency. Some of them really are an attempt by folks who, really for the past almost century have wanted to take the federal government out of supporting folks. I mean, people have forgotten that there were conservative theorists right after FDR and the New Deal who, wrote papers and were railing against the role of the government. They wanted things to go back to where they were. And a lot of stuff, and now after a 100-year campaign, it started out, pretty quietly among some academics. There were, William F. Buckley and other conservatives in the 50s, 60s, and 70s at the National Review, who have railed against federal government. There's some good things there's some good points they make about centralized government and funding, but a lot of things that we like about this country, Social Security, we tend not to have older people just dying in the streets, and that used to happen. We tend not to have 12-year-olds working in mines. We have labor laws to protect folks. That's all part of the New Deal. That's all part of government. And folks have been trying to undermine it. So all of that is just to say that we are in a time where all of this stuff is under a coordinated attack. And we've lost our bearings to some degree. It's just a lot.
It is a lot. Were you concerned about the IJS, about the Jazz Institute? And
not directly, but in as much as all funding is going to be, we are, one of the things I want to talk about and emphasize tonight is that we are really connected, right? So when we talk about, folks will say, well, are you okay? Well, yeah, we may be okay, but if there are things that happen at the federal level, it's going to impact states. Rutgers is a public university. I'm on the Rutgers Newark campus. We service we've been called and ranked as, if not the most diverse campus, one of the one or two most diverse campuses in the country. So we've got a very significant African-American population. We've got East Europeans, we've got Latinos, we've got South Asian community and overall Asian community, a number of women, adults who've come back to school. We have America on our campus, right? And this is an urban university. The city of Newark, which a lot of folks make jokes about, as they do with urban centers, and that's okay. Stay in Manhattan and pay a lot of rent. We're cool. We got the archives.
There.
We've got one of Miles Davis's horns, and we've got original pressings of the Hot Five. So y'all have fun. So yes, directly we're okay, but peripherally we will be impacted. Everybody's going to be impacted by this, as they drive funding out of the federal coffers. States are not prepared to handle this.
Wow. So I know you do some consulting in terms of DEI and other ways of bringing community. And what struck me in reading your bio and so forth are all the different awards from different groups. So, because people think for whatever reason that DEI is just about Black folk. And it's not. Would you give us a definition? What is your definition?
So I'm old enough that I was doing this work when we were just talking about diversity, and then we talked about diversity and inclusion, because again, if people look at the history of diversity, at least in the workplace and in business issues, this comes out of the Nixon administration. Really, affirmative action, and one of the giants in corporate diversity was Roosevelt Thomas, a brother who did a lot to sort of set the stage, and in those days. Part of the big issue was simply getting access for African Americans into jobs that they wouldn't otherwise have gotten.
Have gotten any, because they had no access at that point.
No access at all. And this is one of the things that, as human beings, we like shorthand. We like acronyms and we like short stuff, and it's cool, The problem with it is that you compress the information, right? There's something gets lost. So I'm always wary. It's like when folks first started using the term politically correct, I kept saying, man, at some point folks are going to take this and co-opt it. And it did. It got turned into something like table manners. Oh, you're just trying to be politically correct. And I used to say, no, man, it's not politically correct. How about historically accurate? Right? And so the same thing with affirmative action. Affirmative action got turned into something else. Affirmative action was always, and so we end up we're on our heels having to defend something that has been defined for us and not the way it was originally meant. Affirmative action was always about admit, hire, do right by the people you should have been doing right by all along. It was never about changes of nobody's standards. Stanford University didn't suffer because they reached out to folks, Black kids and Latino kids and Asian American kids in Virginia and other places. These Ivy League, the schools have not suffered. And by the way, even if they had, people act like there was some moment in history where we took over all the jobs. We ran every company. Do you know what I mean? At the same time, by the way, that we were always, I said this at UCLA, I was speaking, I said, man, we are a very busy people because we're taking all the jobs, all the jobs. We're taking all the law school slots, all the medical school slots, all the graduate school slots, all the undergraduate slots, all the sports slots. At the same time that we're committing all the crime, making all the babies, taking all the welfare.
Man, we got it all covered.
I'm just telling you.
I mean, it's so pathetic that you really have to chuckle about it because it's crazy. I mean, the absurdity of it is crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy making. But again, part of it is that we have not defined the term. So again, diversity, equity, and inclusion. There are wonderful things about it. You know, I again, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up because people. Again, it is a human tendency, but there are absolutely are certain communities. There is something around naming a thing that provides ownership and control, if you will. I know I'm speaking sort of metaphysically, and I don't mean to go too far that way, but there really is something to it. So DEI, boom, I know what DEI is. That's it, I got it.
Right.
And they don't even think about diversity, equity, and inclusion. The diversity was getting folks in the door. The equity was equal access. The inclusion was, don't make it so hostile for me that I have to fight my way just to stay. That if I have an option, I'm going to go someplace else.
Right.
That's all it was. And by the way, there are all kinds of people who benefit from this. All kinds of people, including folks who have conservative leanings. Certainly women, white women, if you look at numbers over the past 30 years or so of affirmative action programs in corporate America, the biggest beneficiaries have been white women because you've seen a complete change in the workforce. Now, you still have problems at the CEO level, but from the COO down, it's been great. And of course, feminist scholars and women researchers will tell you this without a doubt. If you talk to the folks at Catalyst, a consulting concern started by women and run by women, it's no question the numbers bear this out. But in terms of public conversation, that whole term, the idea got co-opted. And so again, you and I and others, we ended up having a conversation around, now, what did I just see? The press secretary said something about meritocracy. The U.S. needs to be a meritocracy again.
Yes.
The U.S. was never a meritocracy. Like, stop this, by the way. By the way, there was a group of students, parents and students at Harvard a couple of years ago who sued. They were suing to end affirmative action programs, and they won. These are Asian American students because the argument was, Asian Americans on average outscore white students even. Right. So if it was a straight numbers game, right, you'd see more Asian Americans. I'm chuckling because you probably know this. You've seen the numbers that came out recently. So this same group a couple of years later now is suing because I think they've targeted 3 or 4 schools, Duke, Harvard, I forget who else. Surprise, surprise. The number of Asian American students actually went down. The number of black students did what? Stayed the same. So what happened? The number of white students went up. We were not the enemy. We were not the ones, right? And anyway, don't get me started.
I hear you. So tell us about the Institute of Jazz Studies. What exactly is it, other than the fact that it's really cool and it's on the 4th floor of the library?
Look at you. You really have done your homework. It is very cool. It's a unit at Rutgers University, Newark. There are actually 3 stools to it. There's the curriculum, 3 legs of the stool, rather. There's the curriculum side. We have performance space. We have a jazz club on campus that I get to program, Clements Place. Tonight, Marcos Varela, wonderful bass player, is performing. We live stream everything.
Jay Senate Trio play one day?
Jay can come up and play a washboard if he wants to. I don't have the money to fly him up, but I can pay the brother.
Did you know Chase Jackson by any chance?
I know that name. How do I?
Chase got involved. She was from here. She went up there. She brought us up to play in a church, this beautiful church up there. She had that church series.
In Newark?
In Newark.
Dorothon Kirk's church.
I think
Bethany,
it was.
Bethany Baptist, yeah. Bill Howard was the pastor. He's the pastor emeritus. Great. The Jazz Vespers on Saturdays.
It was something like this was years ago, though.
She's still doing. Dorothon Kirk, Rassan's widow, is still doing that.
Right.
Fabulous.
If you talk to her again, tell her I said hello.
I'm going to see her. We're
Give her my best.
We're both emceeing a jazz festival together tomorrow night.
I love Dorothon.
I think that
And
she's
see how the jazz community, y'all got a thing. And the camaraderie, honestly, that you do that, talk amongst yourselves about who you know and who's who and who's played where and so forth. But
listen, and I'll say it again, I am the luckiest cat on the planet that I've gotten to meet, heroes of mine. Jay gave the PG-13 version. Actually, he gave the G-rated version. I thought he emailed me, but he may have called me, and I was like, Jay, send it. Wait. Send it in session.
Why is a peon calling me?
Wow. You want me to do what? Yeah, man. how much is it gonna cost me? Do I have to pay to do this? Do I have to I got to walk around and carry water? No, I was so thrilled, because when I'm home, I told him I grew up listening to WHRO and Raleigh Bristol in the evenings. That's how I heard jazz, and I saw a bunch of people that I would get to meet. And so when I'm home, it's been Synod in session, and we know he's very well known in the jazz world.
It was really funny because I remember the first time I was driving to South and going through Raleigh or Durham, I can't remember which, and I think it was Durham because their jazz station played one of Jay's songs, and I went, What? because we know Jay, and Jay is here, but when you're out and about and you're hearing his music, in a totally different realm, that's pretty cool.
The first time I heard my music on a radio station, I had gone out to Inglewood, California. I was in Inglewood, and I was in my hotel room. Is when I put out my first record called Obsession. Right,
KCRW.
And it was on album. I can't remember the station now, but it was I was staying in some sleazebag hotel in Inglewood because I didn't have any money. I'm surprised I made it out to California.
It's not far from the airport.
So
it might have been a little sleazy.
Right, I think I hitchhiked to the hotel, but it was some radio station. This guy wanted to interview me, and it was like my first big interview on a station outside of Virginia. And when I checked into my room, I was hanging up my clothes, I was so tired. And it was the day where you had the radio on the TV.
Oh, yeah.
You remember those? The radio was on the bottom of the TV. Yeah. So I turned it on, and even before I started working there, I knew to find jazz on the radio, you had to go down to the left of the dial.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
So I scrolled down the left, and I said, okay, I hear a horn, right? So, and I was listening to it, and I said, man, that sounds really familiar. and come to find out they were playing one of my songs from Obsession, and that was the first time I had ever heard anything.
Cool.
I kind of cried when I heard them. Like, people in Los Angeles are hearing my music.
That's very cool. That's very, very
That's
cool.
a great station. Now, I'm partial in the New York area. It's WBGO.
Right.
And we are 24 hours.
Out of Newark.
Right. Literally across the street from where I live. But I think that's either KCRW or
K-Jazz, maybe? Or
K-Jazz is Santa Monica station, KCSM, I guess.
Right, yeah, that's KCSM.
Yeah, great stations. And they do a very good job of playing. They play their local LA cats, but then they'll find, really gold, from across the country.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in Hampton Roads don't realize what a gem Jay really is.
You really should know,
that's,
because
that's really cool.
And it's great because he is Mr. Jazz for this area, but he's a practitioner of the art. He's a promoter of the art, and cats know him. There are a lot of wonderful musicians from this area: Steve Wilson, James Genus, the Wooten brothers, Billy Drummond.
Right.
I'm blanking on it, but it's really great. It's really important because we don't get a lot of press. We don't know. There's the cats in Richmond, Butcher Brown, these young guys who are making some noise. I don't know them, but they're making some noise around the country.
Can you tell us a bit more about the archives, though? I want to hear about that.
Yeah. So the archive started by Marshall Stearns, a great jazz historian.
You started that.
Exactly. This is what happens when you have another host.
I need this. No.
You're good.
Clearly, I need this.
Because I was just getting ready to do this thing, bring you back to the third leg.
Yeah, we are the largest archive. So again, there's our performance space, Clemens Place.
Okay.
The Clemens Place Jazz. We live stream everything. It's on YouTube, and we do some other things in some of the other spaces on campus. Do live music Wednesday through Thursday. The third leg is the biggest one. That's what everyone knows about and is excited about. We're very well known in the jazz community and research community, and that's the archive, started by Marshall Stearns. My predecessor, Dan Morgenstern, is one of the giants of jazz, just passed away this past year at 90. Dan was about to turn 95, I believe.
Wow.
He'd been editor at Downbeat Magazine for 40 years. He's the only human being to win 8 Grammy Awards for writing liner notes. Yeah. Yeah. Somebody said, how you going to fill Dan's shoes? I was like, oh, no, I'm not planning to fill Dan's shoes. Nobody can do that. I'm going to do my thing. And Dan couldn't have been kinder to me, by the way, when I came in. Talk about a Yahoo, who's this Yahoo walking in to take over this role. So we have the largest holdings of anyone dedicated to jazz. Now, the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian have more than everybody anywhere. But those archives and facilities dedicated to jazz, we're the largest. So we have complete collections of folks like Abby Lincoln. We have Benny Carter's complete collections. And when I say complete collections, I'm talking about all of their memorabilia, all of their home recordings. Abby was a prolific writer, and she made a lot of cassettes, so her doodlings. We have Mary Lou Williams' writings. We have her scores, her notes, reference letters she wrote for Thelonious Monk, trying to help him get a gig. Because people, so you need to check out this young cat. Give him a job. His name is Thelonious Monk. He's going to be a giant. We've got stuff like one of Miles Davis's trumpets. We've got Lester Young's saxophone. The centerpiece of our collection, we have Chico O'Farrell's complete collection. Arturo was very generous to us, and that is a real history of Latin jazz in the country. The centerpiece of our collection is Count Basie's estate, a New Jersey kid, and that's really extraordinary. But, Count Basie was such a huge figure in music, first African American to win a Grammy, ultimately would win. Oh my God, I should know this off the top of my head.
Count
11
was
Grammys.
The first?
First one.
I didn't know
it was
that.
the first year they had the Grammys. He won that year.
Wow.
He's got 2 songs in, and then he won 9 himself.
Wow.
And
If you're just joining us, we're talking about jazz, democracy, the arts, and the war against DEI with Wayne Winborne, assistant professor of the arts at Rutgers University, Newark, and the executive director of the Institute of Jazz Studies, the largest and most comprehensive archive and library of jazz and jazz-related materials in the world, and our very own Jay Sennett, president of Hampton Roads Jazz Incorporated and producer and host of Sennett in Session. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. What questions do you have about jazz, and what is jazz's contributions or connection to democracy, which is the next question I'm going to ask you, because your topic tonight is called Jazz, Democracy, and the Common Good, Group and Solo Improvisation as Tools for Citizenship in the 21st Century. Ooh. Okay, do you want to give us a preview of what that means? Well,
I didn't even want to ask you what that meant.
Exactly.
So now that Jay and I are friends, we can peek behind the curtain. Okay, so again, he calls Wayne. Wayne's like 12 years old again, like, oh my God, yes. So, I also I have to impress, it's Jay Sennett, I have to impress Jay Sennett.
And you lost Jay Sennett.
And now this is, I forget when this was, I don't know if it was November or December, but in Wayne time, it was like 5 years ago, right? Because, I still have to finish writing this thing this afternoon, by the way, y'all. So this, just so you know. So this is a long time ago, and Jay wanted a title. And I'm like, oh, man. Now that we know each other, I'd be like, Jay, man, just put anything down. I'll figure it out later. But again, I got to impress Jason. It's like, oh, my God, I got to give him a title. He wants a bio. I think I put him off for a day. But I also have to impress him. And so folks, if you write books or if you do any of this stuff, you have a title. You have to have a colon, right? Because
yes,
you can't just
course.
It's got to be some catchy thing, Dog bites woman, colon.
Yes.
An examination of blah, 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 blah. So I was like, oh, okay. So, but now Jay's a musician, so I got to do the music thing. So I was like, oh.
Here we go.
Yeah. I'm just telling you. Anyway, I was a mess, and this is a horrible title. This is totally not working. It doesn't.
Okay, then let's break it down this way.
So,
what is jazz's position in terms of our democracy,
absolutely.
And how does that work?
Jazz is often talked about as a metaphor for democracy, the ties and the connections between the two. Winton has talked about this for a long time. People, during the Clinton administration, people talked a lot about this, and there's some obvious connections. One of the things I'm going to talk about, I try to preview the talk without doing it, but
right.
If you think about jazz, right, there is this tension and balance and beauty between the soloist and the group, and there are times when, as a collective, we're always supporting. You're always supporting one another. There are times when you step back and this person steps forward. Well, you don't stop playing, and if you do stop playing, you're still listening. You are providing energy and a vibe to it, right? But you're aware of the other person. And there are times when you subsume your ego I didn't say this to you. I asked you where you recorded the theme music, but I was going to tell you one of the things I loved about it. I asked where you recorded it because in these days, especially cats of my generation in New York, the East Coast, drummers always play loud. I have in fact, oh God, I'm going to blank on his name. He's from Richmond, married to, Regina's husband. I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. My boy,
Alvester Garnett.
Alvester Garnett. And I have this ongoing conversation. Alvester's like, no way. The drummer's supposed to be loud. I was like, bro, not all the time. No way. The drummer's loud, man. I was talking to Max Roach about it, telling you. I play loud. And Alvester's this is a beautiful cat and a beautiful musician. But that's sort of the vibe. And listening to him play, it was so tasteful, right? And so I'm sure he can dial it up when he needs to, And if you're playing on a rock power trio, if you like Led Zeppelin, and you want to hear John Bonham, there are times for that, So of course I've lost my train of thought here, but
back to democracy and jazz.
That tension between the soloist and the group, the balancing of the needs of the collective and the individual, of the federal government, which is all of us in the states, right? This is what democracy at its best finds a way to do. Right. So for instance, we talk about recently our current president made a comment about maybe withholding support to California if they didn't do certain things. Well, California and New York, maybe one of the states, pretty much floats the entire South. The federal government, look, they provide most of the tax, right? So what does that mean? That means that at the start of the fiscal year, poorer states don't have to go raise money to turn the lights on or to pay for, because there's money in the federal coffers that come from the larger states. This is what we do. We support one another.
And support each other.
Balance one another.
Gotcha.
Right? And so democracy at its best does that. I don't talk about this tonight, so I'll use this as an example. Another example is there are times when it's completely out of balance. The U.S. Senate, a lot of political scientists and researchers around the world have called the U.S. Senate literally the most undemocratic institution on the planet. Right? We don't even think about that. Well, why is that? Well, that's because if you looked at the top 11 states by population, I think it's 11. 12 might get us there. They account for almost 80% of the total U.S. population.
Wow.
Now, those 11 states together get 22 Senate votes. So that means 78 other votes are for 20% of the population. And now you understand why we get certain tax bills that don't benefit urban centers or large states, right? And there is a tension there. The whole purpose of it, of course, was so that you wouldn't have the majority just overrunning smaller states, right? But that's why Iowa often determines our president. Wonderful people in Iowa, I'm sure. But how in the world is Iowa?
This little state.
What's the population of Iowa? What is it? 4 million? That's Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Right. So jazz provides a way, and I'm talking about at its best, because there are moments when I get to shine as the soloist, but there are times when I step back. We talk about what's required to be a great jazz musician. It's so hard. So you have to know so much. You're a composer, right? You have to know harmonic changes, because you're literally making up melody on the spot. You're not making it completely on the spot, right? Because you've prepared. And that's the other reason. That's another way that it's a part of democracy. In this country, we don't talk about the requirements of democracy for citizens. What's our requirement?
What's our role?
Right? Yeah. How much do we need to know? How passive can we be? And unfortunately, the material wealth of this country, relatively speaking on a global scale, has allowed a lot of us to sort of check out of democracy. But democracy requires a lot of its practitioners, as does jazz. Right? You have to know a lot. There's a great quote from Charlie Parker I like to use. He said, I'll get it wrong. Of course, I'll get it mixed up. First you learn your instrument, then you learn your music, then you forget all that and just blow. Now, forgetting all that means immersing yourself, gathering expertise allows you freedom. It doesn't constrain you. It allows you now to express yourself, and to express yourself in the context of the other, right? And so in a lot of ways, there are a lot of other ways this goes down, but I firmly believe that being able to improvise, being able to open ourselves up, being a part of the collective, I want for Jay the same as for me, the same opportunities. I want Jay to thrive, because our group is going to
because
sound better.
as the whole, it's going to sound so much better.
Absolutely.
So I have a question, because the civil rights movement is mainly known, and I may be mistaken about this, but in my perception, was mainly known about gospel music as kind of the glue that kept people going through the marches and so forth. What role did jazz play?
Oh, jazz was huge, right? Both in terms of active protest. There's some very important records that were made. You know, Max Roach and Abby Lincoln did the Freedom Now Suite. Sonny Rollins had done a suite. Charles Mingus, very consciously active, both in terms of the music that he made. Fables of Faubus, about the Mississippi governor. Governor of Faubus. Arkansas. Thank you. So there was a direct expression using art, using the music to amplify voices that could not be heard. There was also the role that music plays in terms of a balm, quite honestly. The gospel music and folk music, I would argue, is most closely tied to it because everyone can participate and sing. Jazz was a little bit different in that sense, but all of the musicians were active. When Miles Davis insisted that Cicely Tyson be on the cover of the record with her afro and not having a perm, this was a shot across the bow. When musicians stopped, both in R&B and across the spectrum, stopped conking their hair and decided we're going to wear a natural. These were part of the things that accompany jazz. I would say it accompanies all art. But particularly jazz. It's very much tied to the social periods of each iteration of this music is tied to a particular time, and it's tied to it socio-economically, politically, and technologically, quite honestly.
So I'm going to ask this question of both of you, and that is, when I go to jazz concerts and so forth, I see fewer of us and more of other races and ethnicities in the audience. What are we as Black folks missing in terms of why we're not connecting to jazz the way that you would think that we would still try to connect because we want to keep this art form alive and keep it going? Jay, I'll start with you.
I had an interesting conversation with Dr. Billy Taylor decades ago, and because there was an article that came out with Billy Taylor, was in Ebony magazine. Are Black people giving away jazz? Was the caption of that article. My theory and why I believe it started, that detachment started. Jazz was a dance music, pretty much. It was dance music coming out of the 20s, right into the swing period. And now this is my personal opinion on this. Okay, so when bop started coming in, particularly after the record strike, after the musicians union strike in the early 40s, right, where musicians weren't recording this music. So there was a lot of development happening, like with Charlie Parker and a host of other musicians, that the mass public wasn't hearing because there weren't any recordings coming out. And all of a sudden, Charlie Parker, boom, pops up on record playing like that, because nobody really heard anybody playing like that before. But there was this time before that. I believe that Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Christian, Max, Kenny Clark, Mingus, Charles Mingus, and a few others wanted people to sit and listen to them. See, the white audiences were used to going to the theaters, sitting and listening to orchestral music or to the symphony or the symphonic music. But when it came to jazz, people just were dancing. So they weren't Black people weren't sitting and listening to musicians play. And I think that's what Bird and Dizzy and all these guys wanted. They wanted people to sit and listen. So the music started changing, making it more complex to dance, but they weren't talking about that. But the music was faster, more rhythmically syncopated, more complex harmonically speaking, and all these things. And I think the further we progressed in that direction, the wider the detachment became with the Black audience, because white audiences were used to going to sitting and listening to music. The Black community wasn't. So for Black people, for decades, it was the Saturday night throwdown and the Sunday morning church service, right? So now we have these guys playing this new music in a way that's like, wow, this is no longer of the swing era, like a Count Basie, right, where that's straight, doom, 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 right.
Very easy
now
to
all of a
dance
sudden,
to,
boom,
be there. Right.
it's really syncopated, right, and it was becoming a listening music. But I mean, Wayne, you can offer your opinion on this, but I just believe that was what they wanted. I think they wanted people to come and sit and listen to them, and that's where that detachment started.
Wayne?
I think it's a lot. I think this is all very true. I think there are a number of components to this. That's a part of it. By the way, Branford Marsalis always says to me, "Man, we can't compete with." Like you're gonna lose. You're gonna lose.
You're right.
I think it's a couple of things. I think, and so first let me say, my colleague and my friend is my brother, Stefan Harris, and I have this conversation. And Stefan is of the mind that the music always reflects the people. And whatever's happening, it reflects the people, and it's cool. And he's really pushed me on that, and it's actually helped me. So when bebop comes along, these were younger guys. The older cats weren't necessarily so in love with it. Coleman Hawkins was one of the older cats who fully embraced them. And young people are always, our young people, our teenagers are among the most creative on the planet. They're always creating something new. And I think it's actually healthy for them to push back against us and come up with something different. So I think that was part of it. There was the impact that you couldn't necessarily dance to it. But then a couple of years later, you can really chart this. In the 50s and 60s, the music was reflecting what folks were saying. There's also all this stuff going on in popular music, and you've got commerce. So, because I always question, man, if jazz musicians who were playing straight ahead, who were swinging, if they had made as much money as folks were making in pop music and rock music, would fusion have ever come about? Probably, because the younger guys. You're always listening to the stuff of your peers, and that it should impact what you're doing, right? We can't play exactly like Lester Young and Earl Bostic and those cats and Sidney Bechet in the 20s and 30s. Okay, so there's that piece. So there's commerce, there's the natural shifts that happen with young folks. Quite honestly, once we take music education out of the school, jazz, for some folks, they hear it and they get it right away. And I mean, I'm talking about non-musicians. I'm not talking about musicians, just lay folks. Ooh, I love that. That's beautiful. But for other folks, it requires work.
Yeah.
It's what I joke about people with wine or food. If you haven't worked on developing your palate, you just think, sugary, it's salty. That's why people say, oh, I don't like dry wines. Like, the wine is not dry. Stop it. It's just not sweet. You're used to sweet, And so it requires work. You also had a thing where, the times were changing in such a manner that we in the jazz community were not open and inviting to it. So if you go online and you see folks talking about, it's like, oh, if you don't get it, well, you're not cool. There's something wrong with you. And people don't want to feel stupid. They don't. And people don't want to feel stupid. That feeling is also, on the part of critics, that feeling has also created a problem in jazz where there are a lot of folks who are, they're whatever. Artists have to do what they want to do. I respect artists, and you have to do what you want to do. But everything isn't cool. Everything isn't good necessarily. It's valid. It's a valid expression. And so there's some jazz musicians who made a lot of noise in the 80s and 90s. I've sat in the Village Vanguard traumatized. Like, oh my God. Like, what is this? Like, are you joking?
Wow.
Complete
So
disconnect. But the critics didn't want to say that because nobody wanted to get caught. I call it the John Coltrane theory. If you go back and read the early reviews of Train got dogged by a lot of people. Yeah. No one would dare say that now. But at the time, there were people calling for Miles to fire Train. I remember one reviewer during Train's last tour with Miles, the reviewers in Europe, the reviewer said, Miles Davis and John Coltrane must have had a wonderful time pulling a joke on the audience last night. They managed to play an entire concert and not swing a single note.
As if they knew what swing meant.
This was published.
Wow.
Thelonious Monk's big band. John S. Wilson killed. They had a European tour planned. They do the Town Hall concert, which is now a legendary concert.
Got ripped apart
in the New York Times, and the whole tour got canceled because of it.
It's a classic now.
Wow.
It is a classic now,
Masterpiece.
in the New York Times. I heard a story that Pepper Adams, till the day he died, carried that review in his wallet because he was so mad. Great baritone saxophone player, played with Donald Byrd a lot. He and Donald Byrd were close friends. And Pepper Adams, what I heard, he was like, I was going to be on tour with Thelonious Monk, and this guy killed it. So I'm giving you a long-winded answer. I apologize.
No.
I actually think things are healthier than we think.
Okay.
I really trust artists, the best ones, and I really trust people. There are all these young cats who are swinging.
Well, and
they're doing exactly what we want them to do, and they're trying to figure out how to swing in a hip hop context. They're trying to, because that's the soundtrack to their lives. That's what they're supposed to do. And I tell a lot of young cats that I book, and I get to, our jazz club is free and open to the public. I'm very, very fortunate. And I tell some of these young cats, I say, man, you better play something I don't like. Don't just play stuff I like. This ain't 1978, kid. I want you to play your stuff, and if I hate it, that's probably a good thing.
And because my next question was going to be, are you still getting students into jazz programs, and are you seeing them still playing, still being a part of?
So here's the crazy thing about jazz. I am going to talk about this a little bit tonight. So jazz is the least listened to, least paid for genre of music in this country.
Wow.
It's not even close. Well, people don't want to pay for music, period. But of the it's the least downloaded.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. Everything is jazz. Everything is jazz. There's no such thing as instrumental R&B. I've had whole conversations with friends of mine like, why isn't this just instrumental R&B? This sounds like R&B to me. This sounds like, and this instrumental R&B is totally fine, right? But no, it's jazz, it's jazz. And I finally got that person and pushed them a lot. I got them to say, well, jazz is cool, Wayne. Jazz is sophisticated. I said, you want all the benefits of jazz without actually liking jazz.
I remember seeing a hip hop video with the acoustic bass and the trumpet, but when you listen to the track, there's no acoustic bass or trumpet in the track. But the look, was the sophisticated.
The whole vibe. Right. So that's going on at the same time. And again, folks of our generation, we are notorious for forget these kids need to come and listen to what I want to listen to. And no, I mean, they've got to figure some stuff out on their own. Again, the good news is there are so many young musicians who really have something important to say. No, seriously. This is what I'm going to say. So in the midst of jazz being this least liked music, least paid for,
right?
Guess what? Every university now has a jazz program. When I graduated high school, I think there were 6 degree programs in the country. Right?
Yeah.
So like Miami, Cal State, Northridge,
Berkeley.
Okay, so that was the early 80s.
North Texas.
I graduated in the late 70s. The glory days, young lady.
Okay, so did I.
Days.
They were the glory days.
The glory days.
757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Heather joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Heather. You're on the air.
Yeah, I have been following this with such happiness, and I will get emotional, as I do, as you know. But as far as the voice of jazz and the improvisation and the opportunity, the liberty and the freedom, but also the support, listening to one another, finding each other important, the voice, this has to be an eternal project. And out in New Orleans, out of Newark, shout out to Rutgers. I'm so happy that someone from Portsmouth is up there and archiving. I was just down the road doing a Master of Divinity, and a lot of my friends also did a dual in social work. And Rutgers is happening. And I just love that we can listen to the complexity and sit, but we can also dance in the street, and jazz provides the whole shebang.
Heather, thank you so much for the call. We love hearing from you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Heather's right there.
Thank
Absolutely.
You for that shout out to
and that just really encompassed everything that we've been talking about. Okay, we got about 5 minutes left. I want to know, what are some of your favorite collectibles that are in the museum?
Ella Fitzgerald's. We have Ella Fitzgerald's favorite gown and her favorite. This is so terrible what I'm about to tell you. Her favorite gown, her favorite wig, and you can still smell her perfume on the wig. And don't ask me how I know that. Yeah. But we also have a video of her when we've had exhibitions. So there's a video of her performing in Berlin.
Oh wow!
And it's just killing. I love
another Hampton Roads native
from her in Berlin.
That's right. Yeah. That's a famous recording. Yeah, we have Benny Carter
Newport News,
saxophone.
right?
Yes.
Newport News.
Yes, Newport News.
That's
yes.
right, exactly.
And HR Jazz is getting ready to produce the Ella Fitzgerald Jazz celebration.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
When is that?
It should be 110 years of her.
We're going to start working on that probably next week.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorites.
Barbara, can we remind people about?
I was just getting ready to come to you and ask you to tell them again where they can come hear Wayne tonight and what's going on.
You got to come and hear this man talk. You heard him talk for the past 55 minutes here. Brother Wayne Winborne is going to speak tonight. He's going to kick off the HR Jazz lecture series at the Hampton History Museum, 120 Old Hampton Lane in Hampton, Virginia, starting at 7 o'clock. Admission is free. Come on out, support our lecture series, support the organization, listen to Wayne speak about this music, so brilliantly speak about this music. And our next one is February 15th with the amazing saxophonist Dr. Rahsaan Barber out of the University of North Carolina. And we're going to play on that one, too. Okay. Then Dr. Weldon Hill from Richmond will come down and play. He did his dissertation on Duke Ellington, February 20th. And then yours truly will give the last one, The Rhythmic Sensibilities of Jazz, on February 27th. And they're all free, open to the public.
That's fantastic. Those are all Thursday nights?
No.
No?
Rahsaan is coming in on the 15th.
15th, okay.
That's a Saturday.
Saturday.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we're going to he's going to do one on John Coltrane.
What's the website so that people can go and follow? HRJazz?
HRJazz.org.
Okay.
And then the Hampton History Museum has information up on their site.
Okay. So on all the concerts at the Hampton History Museum, correct?
All the lectures.
Oh, the lectures, rather. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
I wanted to tell you real quickly.
Sure.
Just young folks, and I'll make this very, very quick.
No,
Again,
you're fine.
A lot of the young hip-hop producers and rappers really have dug deep into the history of jazz, and they sample a lot of jazz. Kendrick Lamar, who I was late to the game. I had some of my students turn me on to Kendrick Lamar. I didn't even understand, when he won the Pulitzer for the album To Pimp a Butterfly. I didn't get the metaphor. Like, what is the title? And it was one of my students. My students were like, "Professor, do you know how hard you have to be to pimp a butterfly?" He turned the light on in the room like, oh, my God, he's talking about the streets. He's talking about life. These kids are butterflies.
Isn't that wonderful, though, how your students keep you so fresh?
But they sample all of this jazz. It's back in there. And, again, I think our job, I tell people, my job is to sit in the back of the club and yell at you. You need to swing. You need to go back and practice or learn your course. And their job is to, oh, man, whatever. But take it and merge it and use it and express themselves. We need these artists to help us understand what we're going through. Words fail us at times. And this is what art does. It helps us create, it creates space. It creates the step, that inferential step between what is, which is bleak, to what can be, which is hopeful.
Absolutely.
And even when there's no logic, when logic won't get you there, things look pretty good, No. Things look terrible. But we as a people and others, we
always want to look for that silver lining.
We have. This is what we do. This is how we get to sit here because somebody else did.
Absolutely.
When there was no reason necessarily to believe.
Okay, in the last 30 seconds, I heard that you also are a mean sax player.
That is not true. A long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Thank you, Delcino Miles. My fellow chocolate cardinal.
I was going to say, you've been given away. Do you still play at all?
I do not. I have not played a lot. And it's terrible. I have a saxophone. And I've had a couple of saxophones. I've given them to some young people. Branford, I shouldn't even say this on the air, but one of Branford's old horns is being played by a young person in my life. Branford was never going to get that horn back anyway. But no, I haven't played in a long time. I'm telling you, I hang around folks who can actually play. But I do a lot of producing. I don't know if you know Bruce Barth, the pianist. I've produced Bruce's last 10 records and other folks. So
Wayne, thank you so much for joining us
such
today.
An honor.
We really appreciate having you here. And Jay, as always, thank you. And thank you, audience.
Thank you, Barbara, for having
You're
us.
welcome. Thank you, audience, for your time on this Thursday afternoon. We really appreciate you. Our listeners want to hear the show again? It's easy. Go to whro.org/anotherview or Spotify or wherever you go for your podcast listening pleasure. Next week, the Another View Roundtable with guest host, producer Lisa Godley. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Jordan Christie is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Take a moment and be kind to someone who does not look like you. I guarantee you'll both have a better day. Let's get together again next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.